A mind-bending love story that will leave you breathless when struggling artist Maya accidentally spills coffee on the mysterious Gabriel at her gallery opening. She has no idea this stranger is the man she's been painting in her dreams for months. What starts as an embarrassing encounter spirals into a deadly conspiracy involving psychic experiments. Russian criminals, a government cover-up that connects their souls across time and space. Asterisk. All right, Dignity Stories, Z Crew. Settle in because today's love story is going to leave you breathless. This one's got it all. Asterisk, the champagne flute exploded against the marble floor of the Meridian Gallery. Crystal fragments catching the harsh white light like fallen stars. Maya Delacroix stood frozen in the aftermath, her black cocktail dress splattered with expensive champagne, her carefully applied makeup now streaked with tears she hadn't realized were falling. "You're nothing but a fraud." Richard Pemberton's voice cut through the murmur of shocked gallery patrons. His words hung in the air like poison, each syllable designed to destroy. "Did you really think no one would discover the truth about your little scholarship sob story?" The opening night of Maya's first solo exhibition had transformed from her greatest triumph into her most public humiliation. 3 years of painting, of pouring her soul onto canvas, of scraping together enough money for decent brushes and quality, paint, all of it reduced to this moment of calculated cruelty. She could feel the eyes of New York's art elite boring into her skin. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd like wildfire. The promising young artist from the wrong side of Chicago? The charity case who'd somehow fooled them all? "Richard, please." Maya's voice came out smaller than she intended, broken glass in her throat. "Please, what? Please don't tell them how you manipulated your way into Whitmore Academy with fabricated financial documents. Please don't mention how you've been living a lie for 4 years. His smile was surgical in its precision. "You wanted authenticity in your art, darling. This is as authentic as it gets." The gallery owner, Harold Whitstone, approached with the cautious steps of a man navigating a minefield. His weathered face showed decades of dealing with artistic temperaments, but this was different. This was scandal that could damage his reputation. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," Harold suggested, his voice barely above a whisper. "No." The word came from across the room, cutting through. The tension like a blade. All heads turned toward the voice. A man stepped out of the shadows near Maya's largest painting, a haunting piece titled Fractured Light. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. And his expensive suit couldn't quite hide the restlessness that seemed to vibrate beneath his skin. "This conversation stays public," he continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Since Mr. Pemberton seems so interested in truth." Richard's face flushed red. "And you are someone who knows exactly what kind of man you are, Richard?" The stranger's eyes were steel gray, and they held Richard's gaze without flinching. "The kind who destroys young women when they reject your advances?" Maya's breath caught. She'd never seen this man before. Yet he was defending her with a ferocity that made her chest tighten with something she couldn't name. "How dare you?" Richard began. "How dare I? What? Tell the truth." The man stepped closer, and Maya noticed the slight scar above his left eyebrow, the way his jaw clenched when he was angry. "Should I mention your wife, Richard? The one who has no idea about your creative financing schemes? Or perhaps we should discuss your recent troubles with the SEE. The color drained from Richard's face. The gallery fell silent, except for the soft jazz playing through hidden speakers, a mockery of elegance in the face of such raw animosity. "You don't know what you're talking about," Richard stammered. "I know exactly what I'm talking about." The stranger pulled out his phone and held it up. "I also know that everything you just said about Miss Delacroix was recorded. Slander is still illegal, even at gallery openings." Harold cleared his throat nervously. "Perhaps, Richard, you should— This isn't over," Richard hissed. But he was. Already backing toward the exit. "Neither of you knows who you're dealing with." As Richard fled, the stranger turned his attention to Maya. Up close, she could see the exhaustion etched in the lines around his eyes. The way his expensive shirt was wrinkled as if he'd slept in it. There was something wounded about him, something that recognized the pain in her own eyes. "Thank you," Maya whispered. her voice still shaky. "I don't know why you, because sometimes we all need someone to fight for us." His smile was sad, tinged with a grief that seemed bone-deep, even when we don't deserve it. Before Maya could ask what he meant, he was walking away, disappearing back into the crowd as suddenly as he'd emerged. She watched his retreating figure, her heart hammering against her ribs for reasons that had nothing to do with the confrontation. Harold approached cautiously, wringing his hands. "Maya, dear, perhaps we should discuss the exhibition stays," she said firmly, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "Every painting, every piece. If they want to judge me for where I came from, they can do it while looking at what I created." But as the evening wore on and the gallery slowly emptied, Maya found herself standing alone before Fractured Light, staring at the dark-haired stranger she'd painted months before. She'd ever met him. The man in the painting had the same steel-gray eyes, the same wounded expression, the same air of carrying secrets too heavy for one person to bear. The impossible had just become terrifyingly possible, and Maya realized her carefully constructed world was about to shatter in ways she couldn't begin to imagine. 3 days later, Maya found him sitting in Café Noir, a small coffee shop tucked between a used bookstore and a vintage clothing boutique in Greenwich Village. She'd been walking aimlessly, trying to escape the suffocating walls of her studio apartment, when she spotted him through the rain-streaked window. He looked different in daylight, more vulnerable somehow. The expensive suit had been replaced with dark jeans and a gray sweater that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. His hair was still disheveled, and there were shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. Maya pushed through the door, the bell chiming softly above her head. The cafe smelled of roasted coffee and cinnamon, a warm contrast to the cold October rain outside. She approached his table slowly, her heart racing with a mixture of gratitude and inexplicable recognition. "Mind if I sit?" He looked up from his newspaper and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps? Or recognition? Of his own, of course. Maya settled into the chair across from him, studying his face in the muted light filtering through the windows. The resemblance to her painting was uncanny, down to the small scar above his eyebrow. "I never properly thanked you," she began, wrapping her hands around the warm mug the waitress had brought without being asked. "For what you did at the gallery, no thanks necessary." His voice was rougher in the intimate space of the cafe, gravelly with exhaustion. "Richard Pemberton is a predator. Someone needed to call him out. You knew him. It wasn't a question, and he didn't pretend otherwise. We have history." Maya waited, but he didn't elaborate. Instead, he folded his newspaper and leaned back in his chair, studying her with the same intensity she'd been studying him. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "What did you expect? Someone broken? One who'd let him win?" His eyes moved over her face, cataloging details. "Instead, you kept your exhibition up. Sold 3 pieces, from what I heard." Maya blinked in surprise. "How did you know that?" "I bought one." He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. It was Fractured Light, the painting of the man who looked exactly like him. Harold called to arrange delivery. The world seemed to tilt around Maya. She gripped her mug tighter, using the heat to anchor herself to reality. "That's impossible." "Which part?" "I painted that 6 months ago." Her voice came out as a whisper. "Before I'd ever seen you." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the carefully maintained composure. "What are you talking about?" Maya pulled out her phone with trembling fingers, scrolling through photos until she found what she was looking for. The original sketch, dated and time-stamped, showed the same man sitting in shadows, grief etched into every line of his face. He stared at the screen for a long moment, his face growing pale. When he looked up, his eyes held a haunted quality. That made Maya's chest tight. "This isn't possible," he said, echoing her earlier words. "I've been having dreams," Maya admitted, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "For months. The same man, always in shadows, always carrying something heavy. I thought I was just inventing faces, creating from imagination, dreams." He ran his hands through his hair, and Maya noticed the slight tremor in his fingers. "Christ, what's your name?" she asked suddenly. "Your real name?" He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he met her eyes. Gabriel. Thorne, the name hit her like a physical blow. She knew that name, had seen it in newspapers, heard it whispered in art circles with a mixture of awe and fear. Gabriel Thorne, as in Thorne Industries, she said slowly. As in the Gabriel Thorne whose family owns half of Manhattan. As in the Gabriel Thorne whose father killed himself 2 years ago when the FBI raided our offices. Gabriel's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Yes, that Gabriel Thorne. Maya felt the pieces clicking into place, painting a picture she didn't want to see. The investigation into government contracts. The bribes, your father was a criminal, Gabriel finished, along with half the city council and 3 senators. But he was the only one who paid the ultimate price for it. The cafe seemed to fade around them, leaving only the two of them suspended in this moment of terrible understanding. Maya reached across the table instinctively, her fingers brushing against his hand. The contact sent electricity shooting up her arm. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Gabriel stared at their joined hands, his expression unreadable. 2 years ago. I would have been sitting where you are now, believing in justice, in the system, thinking the good guys always win. And now I know better. He pulled his hand away, but gently, as if reluctant to break the contact. Now I know that sometimes the innocent pay for the guilty. Sometimes the system is designed to protect the wrong people. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October weather. Gabriel, what did you do? His smile was sharp as broken glass. I became exactly what they said I was. What they needed me to be. He stood up, pulling out his wallet and dropping enough cash on the table to cover both their drinks and a generous tip. I stopped fighting the family business. What does that mean? Gabriel looked down at her, and in his eyes she saw a darkness that made her stomach clench with fear and something else she didn't want to name. It means, Maya Delacroix, that you might want to stay away from me, because everything I touch turns to ash. He paused at the door, looking back at her one last time. And I'd hate to see what happens to someone as beautiful as you. As he disappeared into the rain, Maya sat frozen in her chair, her mind racing. The painting, the dreams, the impossible recognition between them. And now this revelation that the man who'd defended her so fiercely was potentially as dangerous as the one he'd driven away. She pulled out her phone and typed his name into the search bar. Results made her blood run cold. Gabriel Thorne wasn't just the heir to a scandal-ridden empire. According to recent reports, he'd taken over the family business with a ruthlessness that made his father look like a choir boy. And somehow, impossibly, she'd been dreaming about him for months. Maya shouldn't have followed him. She knew it was reckless, dangerous, possibly suicidal. But the pull was stronger than logic, stronger than fear. For 2 weeks after their encounter at the cafe, she'd been unable to paint anything but variations of his face, each canvas darker than the last. The address she'd tracked down led to an abandoned warehouse in Long Island City. The October night was bitter cold, with fog rolling off the East River in ghostly tendrils. Maya pulled her coat tighter as she approached the building, her footsteps echoing off the empty street. Through a grimy window she could see light spilling from the upper floors. Voices carried on the wind, too distant to make out words but sharp with tension. Against every instinct screaming at her to run, Maya found a fire escape and began to climb. The metal was slick with condensation and rust flaked off under her hands, but she managed to reach a window on the 3rd floor. Through the glass, she could see into what appeared to be an office space, completely at odds with the warehouse's decrepit exterior. Modern furniture, expensive artwork, computers humming with activity, and Gabriel, standing behind a massive desk, his face carved from stone as he listened to a man in an expensive suit gesticulate wildly. The shipment was supposed to arrive 3 days ago, the man was saying, his voice carrying easily through the thin glass. Our buyers are getting impatient, and impatient buyers become dangerous buyers. Victor knows the risks, Gabriel replied, his voice calm but edged with steel. If he can't deliver on schedule, we'll find someone who can. You don't understand. This isn't just about money anymore. The Kozlov family doesn't accept excuses, accept results, or they accept bodies. Maya's blood ran cold. She pressed closer to the window, trying to process what she was hearing. This wasn't just about government contracts or white-collar corruption. This was something far more dangerous. Gabriel moved around the desk with fluid grace, and Maya could see the gun holstered at his shoulder beneath his jacket. Then perhaps, you should call Victor and explain the situation. Make it clear that failure isn't an option. Gabriel, please. You know I've been loyal to your family for 20 years. But this thing with the Russians, it's different. Your father never, my father is dead. Gabriel's voice dropped too barely, above a whisper, but it carried more menace than any shout, and his methods died with him. We're playing by new rules now. The man nodded nervously and hurried from the room. Gabriel stood alone for a moment, staring out the window directly toward where Maya was hidden. For a terrifying instant, she thought he'd spotted her, but his gaze seemed to look through her, focused on something only he could see. He pulled out his phone and dialed. It's me. You have a problem. A pause. No bigger than that. Someone's been asking questions about the girl. Maya's heart stopped. The girl? Were they talking about her? I don't know yet, but someone's been. Digging into Maya Delacroix's background, real deep. Financial records, school transcripts, family history. Gabriel's voice hardened. Find out who, and shut it down. Permanently if necessary. The phone call ended and Gabriel walked to a safe, hidden behind a painting. Maya watched in horrified fascination as he removed stacks of cash, what looked like fake passports, and a second gun. As he checked the weapon with practiced efficiency, Maya realized she was looking at someone who'd crossed lines she couldn't even imagine. A sound behind her made her freeze. Footsteps on the fire escape, climbing toward her position. Panic flooded her system as she realized she was trapped 3 stories up with nowhere to run. Well, what do we have here? The voice belonged to a man she didn't recognize, built like a linebacker with dead eyes and a smile that never reached them. Behind him was another man, equally menacing, blocking her path to the stairs. Just enjoying the view, Maya said, fighting to keep her voice steady. I bet you are. The first man grabbed her arm with bruising force. A boss is going to want to talk to you. They dragged her down the fire escape and through a side entrance into the building. The interior was a maze of corridors and offices that felt more like a corporate headquarters than the criminal enterprise she'd stumbled into. They deposited her in a small room with no windows and locked the door behind them. Maya paced the confined space, her mind racing. She'd walked into something far beyond her understanding, something that could get her killed. The dreams, the painting, the impossible connection with Gabriel. None of it made sense, but it had led her here, to this moment where her life hung by a thread. The door opened, and Gabriel entered alone. In the harsh fluorescent light, he looked older, more dangerous. The man who'd defended her at the gallery seemed like a different person entirely. You shouldn't have come here, Maya. I had to understand. She backed against the far wall, suddenly aware of how small the room was, how close he was standing. The dreams, the painting. You felt it too, didn't you? The connection. Something flickered in his eyes, vulnerability quickly masked by steel. What you felt was imagination. What you painted was coincidence. Don't lie to me. Maya stepped forward, closing the distance between them. I've been dreaming about you for months, about your pain, your guilt, about the choice you made after your father died. Gabriel's control finally cracked. He slammed his palm against the wall beside her head, caging her in with his body. You don't know anything about the choices I've made, then. Tell me. Ass. Could smell his cologne, feel the heat radiating from his skin. Despite everything, despite the danger and the fear, she wanted to touch him. Tell me why you're doing this. Because sometimes becoming the monster is the only way to protect the things that matter. His voice was rough with emotion. Because they killed him, Maya. Not the investigation, not the shame. They murdered my father and made it look like suicide. Maya's breath caught. Who? The same people who are asking questions about you now? The same people who want to use you to get to me. Gabriel's hand moved to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with surprising gentleness. The same people I'm going to destroy, even if it costs me my soul. Gabriel, the sound of shouting, erupted from somewhere in the building, followed by the unmistakable sound of gunfire. Gabriel spun toward the door, his hand moving instinctively to his weapon. "What's happening?" Maya whispered. Gabriel's face had gone pale, his eyes calculating rapidly. "We're out of time." He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the door. "They found us." As they burst into the corridor, Maya could hear men shouting in what sounded like Russian, their voices growing closer. Gabriel led her through a maze of passages, moving with the confidence of someone who'd planned for this contingency. "Are they?" Maya asked as they ran. "People who don't like being crossed?" Gabriel pushed her into a stairwell, checking behind them. "People who think you're leverage." They reached the ground floor and Gabriel led her toward what appeared to be a loading dock. But as they approached the exit, figures emerged from the shadows, surrounding them with military precision. "Gabriel Thorne," a voice called out in accented English. "You've caused us considerable inconvenience." Maya felt Gabriel tense beside her, his hand still gripping hers with bruising intensity. In the dim light, she could see at least 6 men, all armed, all focused on them with predatory patience. "Let the girl go," Gabriel said, his voice steady, despite the impossible odds. "This is between us." "I'm afraid that's no longer possible." The man who seemed to be their leader stepped into the light, revealing a scarred face and eyes like chips of ice. "Miss Delacroix has become quite valuable to us, you see. We've discovered something very interesting about her connection to you." Maya felt the world tilt around her. "What connection?" The man smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Maya had ever seen. "Perhaps your boyfriend should tell you about the insurance policy his father left behind, about the genetic experiments, about why you've been dreaming of a man you'd never met." Gabriel's grip on her hand tightened to the point of pain, and Maya realized that everything she thought she knew about her life, about herself, about the impossible connection between them, was about to shatter completely. The abandoned subway tunnel beneath the warehouse smelled of rust and decades of neglect. Water dripped steadily from cracked concrete overhead, each drop echoing like a countdown in the suffocating darkness. Maya sat zip-tied to a metal chair, her wrists raw from struggling against the restraints. Gabriel hung suspended from pipes 20 feet away, blood trailing from a cut above his eye. He'd fought like a man possessed when they'd tried to separate them, taking down 2 of their captors before overwhelming numbers had brought him down. "You're both very resilient," Viktor Kozlov said, circling Maya's chair like a shark scenting blood. "But resilience only delays the inevitable." Maya had learned his name during the 3 hours they'd been held captive. 3 hours of questions, threats, and revelations that had shattered her understanding of reality. Viktor was elegant in the way only true predators could be. His expensive suit, unmarred despite the violence he'd orchestrated. "The girl doesn't know anything," Gabriel said, his voice hoarse from shouting. "Let her go." "Oh, but she knows everything." Viktor stopped behind Maya, his hands settling on her shoulders with false gentleness. "She just doesn't understand what she knows." Yet, Maya tried to shrink away from his touch, but the restraints held her firmly in place. "I told you I don't know what you're talking about." Viktor laughed, the sound echoing off the tunnel walls. "Project Morpheus. Does that name ring any bells, Miss Delacroix?" Maya shook her head, but something cold was forming in her stomach. A memory half forgotten of her mother crying over medical bills when Maya was 12, of experimental treatments for her father's cancer, forms she'd been too young to understand. "Your father was dying of brain cancer," Viktor continued conversationally. "Stage 4, glioblastoma, terminal. Your mother was desperate, willing to try anything to save him." "That's enough," Gabriel snarled, struggling against his restraints. "She has nothing to do with this, but she has everything to do with this." Viktor moved to a metal briefcase and withdrew a thick folder. Charles Thorne was brilliant, I'll give him that. Before he became consumed with government contracts and political corruption, he was a neuroscientist, one of the best. World started spinning. "That's impossible, is it?" "Think, Maya. Why do you think you could paint Gabriel's face months before meeting him? Why do you dream of memories that aren't your own?" Viktor opened the folder and showed her photographs, laboratory settings, medical equipment. and her father. 20 years younger, in a white coat. Project Morpheus was Charles Thorne's attempt to map neural pathways, to create artificial telepathic connections between subjects. Your father volunteered for the experimental treatment. Victor's smile was cruel in its satisfaction. But the real breakthrough came when they realized the neural modifications could be inherited. Gabriel had gone very still, his face pale. In the dim light, you're lying, am I? Victor pulled out another photo. This one showed Maya as a young child, maybe 5 years old, wired two machines in what was clearly the same laboratory. Tell me, Miss Delacroix, do you remember the tests? The headaches? The way your mother would cry after taking you to those appointments? Memory crashed over Maya like a tidal wave. White rooms, needles, men in lab coats asking her to describe. Pictures she couldn't see, to draw faces that existed only in her mind. Her mother's hand gripping hers as she whispered apologies Maya hadn't understood. The neural pathways were successfully mapped and enhanced in both subjects, Victor continued. A psychic connection that transcended physical proximity. Charles Thorne created a link between his son and a little girl whose father he was supposed to save, but he didn't save him, Maya whispered, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. My father died anyway. The cancer treatment failed, yes. But the neural modifications remained active in you. For years, you've been unknowingly connected to Gabriel Thorne, experiencing fragments of his emotions, his memories, his pain. Maya looked across the tunnel at Gabriel, seeing her own horror reflected in his eyes. You knew? I suspected. Gabriel's voice was barely above a whisper. The dreams started after my father died. Images of a woman I'd never met. Feelings that weren't my own. I tried to convince myself I was losing my mind. How touching, Victor interrupted. But this reunion isn't about romance. It's about leverage. He pulled out a tablet and showed them surveillance footage. Maya's mother walking to her car outside the hospital where she worked. Mrs. Delacroix is such a dedicated nurse. Be terrible if something happened to her. Maya's blood turned to ice. Don't you dare touch her. It depends entirely on your cooperation. Victor set the tablet aside and approached Gabriel. You see, your boyfriend has something that belongs to us, something his father stole before he died. Gabriel's jaw clenched. I don't know what you're talking about. Victor backhanded him with casual violence, the crack echoing through the tunnel, blood sprayed from Gabriel's split lip. The encryption. Keys, Gabriel. The ones that unlock the offshore accounts. The ones worth $200 million? My father took that money from people like you, Gabriel spat. Criminals, murderers, drug dealers, and now we want it back. Victor wiped his knuckles with a handkerchief, with interest. Maya watched Gabriel struggle with the decision, saw the moment when his resolve cracked. He looked at her with something. That might have been love, or might have been goodbye. The keys are in my apartment, Gabriel said finally. Hidden behind a painting in the bedroom. Victor smiled. See, that wasn't so difficult. He gestured to one of his men. Take Miss Delacroix upstairs. If Mr. Thorne is lying, kill her slowly. As they dragged Maya toward the tunnel entrance, she caught Gabriel's eye one last time. In that instant, she felt the connection Victor had. Described with startling clarity, Gabriel's thoughts flooded into her mind, crystal clear and desperate. He was lying about the keys. They weren't in his apartment. They were somewhere else entirely. Somewhere Victor would never find them. Gabriel was planning something that would likely get him killed. But as Maya was hauled up into the warehouse, one thought burned brighter than all the others, a promise that felt like a vow across the psychic connection binding them together. He would save her mother. Whatever it cost him, whatever he had to sacrifice, he would make sure Elena Delacroix lived, even if it meant Gabriel Thorne would not. The last thing Maya saw before they threw her into the back of a van was the warehouse exploding behind them, flames reaching toward the October sky like the fingers of a dying god. And through their impossible connection, she felt Gabriel's pain as the world went dark around her consciousness, leaving only the echo of his final thought, forgive me. Maya woke in a hospital bed 3 days later to the sound of her mother's voice reading Psalms. The afternoon light streaming through the windows was soft and golden. Nothing like the harsh fluorescence of the underground tunnel. For a moment she almost believed the last weeks had been nothing more than a nightmare. Then she tried to sit up, and pain lanced through her skull like lightning. "Easy, Mia," Elena Delacroix said, setting aside her worn Bible and reaching for Maya's hand. "You have a concussion? The doctor said you might have memory problems for a while." Maya studied her mother's face, seeing new lines of worry etched around her eyes. Elena was safe, unharmed, which meant Gabriel had somehow kept his promise. But at what cost? "Where is he?" Maya asked, though she dreaded the answer. Elena's expression grew carefully neutral, the look she wore when delivering bad news to patients' families. "The man from the warehouse? He's alive. Barely." Maya closed her eyes, feeling the psychic connection between them like a wound that wouldn't heal. She could sense Gabriel's presence somewhere in the building, could feel his pain radiating through the neural pathways that bound them together. But there was something else, something wrong. "I need to see him." "Maya, you're in no condition now." Maya struggled to sit up despite the agony in her head. "I need to see him now." Elena sighed in the way of mothers who knew when arguing was futile. She helped Maya into a wheelchair and pushed her down corridors that smelled of antiseptic and approaching death. They stopped outside the ICU, where through a window, Maya could see Gabriel connected to more machines than seemed possible for one human body. Detective Sarah Chen approached them, her badge visible on her jacket. She was younger than Maya had expected, with intelligent eyes and the tired expression of someone who'd seen too much. "Miss Delacroix, I need to ask you some questions about what happened." Maya barely glanced at her. "Is he going to live? The doctors think so. But he hasn't regained consciousness since the explosion." Detective Chen consulted her notes. "We found Viktor Kozlov and 2 of his men dead in the tunnel. Apparent gas leak caused the blast. Mr. Thorne was found near the entrance, badly burned but alive." Maya knew Chen was lying. There had been no gas leak. Gabriel had rigged the explosion himself, had turned the warehouse into a tomb for their captors, while somehow managing to escape the worst of it. She could feel the truth of it through their connection, along with his guilt and his desperate hope that she would understand. "The FBI is very interested in Mr. Thorne's business dealings," Chen continued. "But given what he did to save you and eliminate a dangerous criminal organization, they're willing to make certain accommodations." Maya finally looked at the detective. "What kind of accommodations? Witness protection? New identities? A chance to start over?" Chen's voice softened slightly. "The connection between you two, the neural modifications your father underwent, aid. The FBI has been aware of Project Morpheus for years. They want to study you both, but they're also willing to protect you." Through the window, Maya watched the machines keeping Gabriel alive, their steady beeping the only sound in the corridor. She pressed her hand against the glass and felt his consciousness stir in response to her proximity. "He's waking up," she said. Chen frowned. The doctor said Gabriel's eyes opened, immediately seeking Maya through the window, even separated by glass and medical equipment. The connection between them blazed with an intensity that took Maya's breath away. She could feel his relief, his love, his overwhelming guilt for dragging her into his world. A nurse entered Gabriel's room and began checking his vitals, speaking to him in low tones. Maya watched him nod, watched him try to sit up despite obvious pain. When he pointed toward the window, toward her, the nurse opened the door. "He wants to see you," the nurse said. "Just for a minute." Maya wheeled herself into the room, Elena and Detective Chen following. Up close, Gabriel looked even worse than she'd imagined. Burns covered half his face, and she could see the edges of surgical dressings beneath his hospital gown. But his eyes were clear, focused on her with laser intensity. "Your mother?" he asked, his voice rough from smoke inhalation. "Safe," Maya replied. "You kept your promise." Gabriel's smile was painful to watch. "Had to. Couldn't let them hurt the only family you have left?" Detective Chen stepped forward. "Mr. Thorne, we need to discuss your future." "Go." The FBI is prepared to offer you a deal in exchange for information about your father's associates and the money. You recovered from Kozlov's accounts. Gabriel never took his eyes off Maya. What about her new identity? New life? Complete separation from everything that happened? Chen paused. The neural connection will fade over time without proximity. You could both be free. Maya felt Gabriel's emotions through their psychic link. The crushing weight of his self-sacrifice, his willingness to let her go even though it would destroy him. She reached out and took his hand, feeling the spark of their connection intensify. "Oh," she said firmly. Detective Chen blinked. "I'm sorry," he said no. Maya looked directly at Gabriel, seeing her own determination reflected in his eyes. "I'm not running from this. From him, from what we are." "Maya," Elena said softly, "you have a chance for a normal life. A safe life." "Normal?" Maya laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I've been connected to this man since I was 5 years. Old, I've been painting his face, dreaming his dreams, feeling his pain for months before I ever met him. There is nothing normal about any of this." Gabriel squeezed her hand weakly. "You don't understand what you're choosing. The FBI might offer protection, but there will always be others. People who want to use what we are, what we can do together. Then we face them together." Maya leaned closer, her voice dropping too. A whisper that only he could hear. "I felt what you felt in that tunnel. The moment you decided to sacrifice yourself for me, for my mother. You think I'm going to walk away from that? From you?" Through their connection, Maya could feel Gabriel's resistance crumbling, replaced by something that felt like hope and terror in equal measure. Detective Chen cleared her throat. "There is another option, one that might satisfy everyone's needs." Maya and Gabriel looked at her expectantly. "The FBI has been developing a new division, specialized cases involving unusual circumstances. You could use people with your particular abilities." Chen's expression was carefully neutral. "It wouldn't be easy. There would be training, protocols, oversight. But you'd be working together, using your connection for something positive. Fighting people like Victor," Gabriel said slowly, "among other things. Criminal organizations, terrorist cells, anyone who thinks they can hide from conventional investigation." Jen leaned forward. "You'd have resources, protection, purpose, and most importantly, you'd have each other." Maya felt Gabriel's pulse quicken under her fingers, felt his cautious optimism bleeding through their bond. For the first time since waking up in the hospital, she allowed herself to imagine a future that didn't involve running or hiding. "What about my mother?" Maya asked. "Full protection? New identity if she wants it? Or we can make her part of the cover story?" Chen stood up. "But I need an answer soon. There are already people asking questions about what happened at that warehouse." Alina moved to stand beside Maya's wheelchair, her hand settling on her daughter's shoulder. "Whatever you decide, Mia, I'll support you. But remember what your father used to say. Sometimes the thing that seems like a curse is actually a gift." Maya looked at Gabriel, seeing past the burns and bandages to the man who had risked everything to save her. Through their connection, she felt his love, his fear, his desperate hope that they could build something together from the ashes of their separate tragedies. "We'll do it," Maya said. "Together." Gabriel's smile transformed his battered face. Together. 6 months later, Maya stood in a different gallery, this one inside a secure federal building in Virginia. Her paintings lined the walls, but these weren't portraits of strangers or landscapes. These were maps of human consciousness, visual representations of the psychic connections she and Gabriel had learned to navigate and control. Gabriel approached from behind. His scars barely visible now, his presence immediately registering through. Their bond, like coming home. "The Jakarta case is closed," he said, sliding his arms around her waist. "Terrorist cell completely dismantled." Maya leaned back against him, marveling at how their connection had evolved from unwanted intrusion to perfect partnership. They could communicate across continents now, share not just emotions but thoughts, strategies, entire conversations conducted in the space between heartbeats. "Any word on our next assignment?" she asked. "Chen says there's a situation in Prague. human trafficking ring with connections to some very interesting biotechnology research. Gabriel's voice darkened with the same protective fury she'd first witnessed at the gallery. They're experimenting on children. Maya turned in his arms, seeing the determination in his eyes that matched her own. They'd found their purpose in the most unlikely place. Turning their impossible connection into a weapon against the darkness they'd both known too intimately. When do we leave? Tomorrow. Gabriel cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. Are you ready for this? Maya thought about the girl she'd been 6 months ago, struggling to pay rent and believing she was alone in the world. That girl could never have imagined this life, this love, this sense of belonging to something greater than herself.
With you.
She smiled, feeling their connection pulse with shared purpose and unshakable devotion. I'm ready for anything. As Gabriel kissed her, Maya felt the last pieces of her old life fall away like shed skin. She was no longer Maya Delacroix, the struggling artist from Chicago. She was something new, something stronger, something forged. In fire and bound by forces beyond ordinary human understanding, outside, Prague waited with its shadows and secrets. But in this moment, surrounded by her art and held by the man who had become her anchor in the storm, Maya knew she had found exactly where she belonged, in the space between heartbeats, in the connection that defied science and transcended ordinary love, in the certainty that some bonds are strong enough to survive anything, even the end of the world. Asterisk. Don't miss. Subscribe and hit the bell for more emotionally intense stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. The end.